Imagine treating a piece of software like, well, a nuclear warhead. Because that is exactly what happened this week.
Yeah.
On Friday, June 12, 2026, just 10 days after a new presidential executive order, a leading tech company was forced to yank its newest artificial intelligence models completely offline. And not because they were broken, but to keep them out of the hands of foreign governments.
It was an immediate hard stop on a major commercial release. They're effectively treating lines of code with the same severity as international arms control.
Which is wild. I mean, this unprecedented move signifies a massive shift. Advanced AI is no longer just a consumer product or a neat tool to, draft your emails. It is officially being treated by the federal government as a highly sensitive national security asset. And that brings us to the mission of our deep dive today. We are going straight into the 5 biggest tech and security stories of the week. We'll start by unpacking the billions of dollars funding this AI boom, explore the autonomous agents being built with that money, uncover the massive security flaws these systems are inadvertently exposing, and then end with our most critical story, the sudden, unprecedented government intervention in AI deployments.
Right. And to understand why governments are suddenly so fiercely protective of this technology, we really first have to look at the sheer scale of the infrastructure being built. The foundation of everything else happening right now comes down to money and compute power.
Which takes us straight into story number 5, Oracle's latest earnings report. We're looking at their Q4 and fiscal year 2026 numbers, and the scale here is almost hard to comprehend. They reported a record $67.4 billion in total yearly revenues.
Wow.
Yeah. But the number that really jumps off the page is their RPO remaining performance obligations. It hit a staggering $638 billion.
Which is massive.
It's more than 4 times what it was the prior year. Plus, their multi-cloud AI database business basically quintupled. It's their fastest growing business in history.
So those RPO numbers are crucial to understand. They represent contracted future revenue. It shows that enterprise customers aren't just running small pilot programs with AI anymore.
Right.
They're locking in massive long-term commitments for compute power and database management just to run these huge models.
Okay, let's unpack this though, because I don't really get the Wall Street reaction here. If you look at those numbers, RPO is up 4x. They are printing money. Why did Oracle stock actually drop 11% after the market closed?
Yeah, the market reaction was interesting.
It feels like investors are acting like a parent looking at a teenager's credit card bill, right? They're punishing them for buying the exact hardware they clearly need to fulfill those $638 billion in contracts.
It really comes down to the brutal reality of capital expenditures, or CapEx. You're right that they need the hardware, but the accelerated spending is driven by incredibly high component costs right now.
Like the chips.
Exactly. Think about the scarcity and the price of advanced GPUs and accelerator chips. Oracle's co-CEO even noted on the call that they're speeding up their spending to get to revenue faster. But investors are notoriously short-sighted.
Shocker.
Right. So they see billions going out the door today to build these massive data centers, and they panic about profit margins in the immediate term. They want the revenue now without the massive upfront build cost.
So they're basically punishing Oracle for buying the oven they need to bake the cake.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
But the companies themselves are playing a much longer game. They are spending those billions right now to secure dominance for the next decade.
Yeah.
And they're forging deep partnerships to justify it. For instance, PwC just partnered with OpenAI to build new financial reporting tools directly on top of Oracle platforms. So they're taking enterprise data and piping it securely into these massive language models.
So Oracle is buying all these ovens, and Google is showing us exactly what comes out of them. Which brings us to story number 4. The major announcements out of Google I/O 2026 from May, specifically around 2 new models, Gemini Omni and then Gemini 3.5 Flash. Let's look at Omni first. They are calling this an any-to-any model. It takes text, images, audio, and video as inputs and generates high-quality video outputs in a single interface.
It's incredible.
The demo was wild. You just ask it to make the sculpture out of bubbles, and it edits a video seamlessly, and you can publish it straight to YouTube Shorts.
Well, the mechanism there is what's really wild. It's not translating your speech to text and then text to code, and then code to video.
Oh, right.
It's natively processing all those modalities at once. But, while Omni is flashy, Gemini 3.5 Flash is where the industry is actually shifting.
Right, because 3.5 Flash introduces what they call agentic workflows. They rolled out this anti-gravity harness, which allows developers to deploy subagents that just run 204/7. So you have a personal AI agent called Gemini Spark. The demo showed it taking a prompt, figuring out a list of nut-free snacks, and then autonomously going to Instacart and ordering them for you. Or you can have information agents that just live in the background, constantly refreshing to track when your favorite athlete drops a new sneaker collaboration.
So what's fascinating here is the shift from creator to doer. Generative AI is like a recipe book. It tells you how to make the dish.
Okay.
Agentic AI, powered by frameworks like anti-gravity, is the sous chef who actually reads the recipe, goes to your pantry, chops the onions, and turns on the stove without you having to ask.
Wow.
It's all about executing long-horizon tasks across multiple external systems without human intervention at every single step.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, but I have to push back a little. Are we sure that handing over our digital lives to 247 autonomous subagents is actually a good idea?
That's the big question.
I mean, it feels like we're creating digital ghosts that are executing tasks, spending real money, and navigating our personal accounts in the background while we sleep. It sounds less like a helpful sous chef and more like a recipe for a massive anxiety attack.
You're hitting on the core friction point of this era, which is the trust threshold.
Yeah.
When an AI is just generating a poem, the cost of failure is zero. If it writes a bad poem, you laugh and delete it.
Right.
But when an AI sous chef has your credit card and is navigating enterprise software, the trust required has to be absolute. If that agent goes off the rails, or if it's manipulated, the damage is real and immediate.
And relying on those autonomous agents assumes the underlying operating systems they are running on are impenetrable.
Which we know they aren't.
Exactly. Which takes us to story number 3. Because Microsoft's latest Patch Tuesday proves our infrastructure is basically Swiss cheese. On June 9, 2026, Microsoft released an update that broke all historical records.
Oh yeah, this was a big one.
They patched 206 security flaws in a single day. That is the largest single update since the program began way back in October 2003. We're talking 39 critical flaws, 167 important ones, and 3 publicly known 0 days.
And those 0 days reveal exactly how fragile the foundation is. One of them, known as the yellow key BitLocker bypass, is particularly severe.
What does that one do?
It exploits a flaw in how the system handles encryption keys during boot up. It literally allows an attacker with physical access to bypass encryption entirely and extract plaintext data straight from the hardware.
Man, but the one that really caught my eye is CVE 2026-49160. It is an HTTP2 bomb.
Yes.
That sounds completely apocalyptic. From what I read, it's a vulnerability that can exhaust 64 gigabytes of a server's RAM in just 45 seconds. How does a piece of code even do that mechanically?
Well, think of it like sending a compressed spring inside a tiny, seemingly innocent digital package. The server receives this tiny request and opens it, but the malicious request tells the server to allocate massive, continuous blocks of memory to decompress it, and then the attacker abruptly drops the connection.
Oh, wow.
All right, so the server is left holding this infinitely expanding bomb in its memory until the system completely crashes.
That is terrifying. But here is the craziest detail to me. This HTTP2 bomb wasn't found by a human security researcher staring at code. It was found by OpenAI's Codex team.
Exactly.
Wait, so OpenAI's own AI found this? It's like hiring an AI Terminator to hunt down the bugs before the bad guys do.
It really is a massive paradigm shift in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And it explains why Microsoft had issued 206 patches in 1 month.
Because the AI is just finding them that fast.
Precisely. Defensive teams are now using large language models to scan millions of lines of legacy code to find obscure vulnerabilities at a speed humans simply cannot match. AI is drastically accelerating the arms race between defensive patching and offensive exploitation.
Okay, so AI finding bugs is great, assuming the good guys find them first and patch them.
Right.
But what happens when the patch isn't there? That brings us to story number 2. In late May and early June 2026, a financially motivated cybercriminal group known as ShinyHunters launched a massive campaign. They exploited a true zero-day vulnerability, CVE 2026-35273, in the Oracle PeopleSoft Environment Management Hub.
It's PSEM hub, yeah.
Right. By exploiting this, they achieved unauthenticated remote code execution. Over 100 organizations were compromised, and 68% of them were U.S. higher education institutions. So what does this all mean for the victims?
Well, this raises an important question regarding legacy enterprise software. To understand how devastating this is, we have to look at the mechanics of unauthenticated remote code execution.
Okay.
It means the attackers didn't need to steal a password or trick an employee with a phishing email. They used what's called a gadget chain.
A gadget chain.
Yeah. They took a few smaller, seemingly harmless flaws in how the PeopleSoft hub processes Java files, and they stacked them together into a skeleton key. They dropped unauthorized JSP files directly into the environment, completely bypassing the firewall and bypassing multi-factor authentication entirely.
That's insane. And there's a huge irony here. We just talked about Oracle printing billions of dollars to build the sci-fi AI future. But meanwhile, their legacy PeopleSoft software, the stuff actually running the HR and finance departments of our universities, is crumbling under these attacks.
Yes.
It's the ultimate technical debt.
It is the hardest problem in enterprise IT right now.
Right.
Organizations are rushing to implement these new agentic AI workflows we just discussed, but they're bolting them onto legacy systems that were built decades ago.
Right.
And advanced threat actors like ShinyHunters know this. They're shifting away from trying to hack individual users and instead hunting for these deep architectural flaws in enterprise hubs to gain maximum extortion leverage. If an attacker locks down a university's entire financial and student record system, the pressure to pay the ransom is immense.
And if you're running IT at a university right now, this is your nightmare scenario, because ShinyHunters used a vulnerability that Oracle didn't even patch until June 10. How do you defend your university or business against an invisible, unknown threat?
It's incredibly difficult. It creates a highly volatile mix. You have immense computational power being deployed, you've got autonomous agents interacting with our most sensitive data, and severe systemic vulnerabilities in the legacy systems housing that data.
Right. So we have billions pouring into AI, agents acting autonomously, AI uncovering massive software flaws, and hackers exploiting 0 days to cripple institutions.
A perfect storm.
Exactly. And because of this volatile mix of immense power and severe vulnerability, governments are deciding they can no longer stand on the sidelines. Which brings us to the #1 story of the week.
Yes, the big one.
The geopolitics of artificial intelligence. On Friday, June 12, 2026, Anthropic abruptly suspended all access to its newly launched frontier models, Claude Fable 5 and Claude Mythos 5.
They were taken completely offline.
Yeah. And just to be totally clear on the facts as reported, this action was taken to comply with a direct directive from the Trump administration. The goal was to prevent foreign nationals from accessing advanced American AI models.
And the context here is critical. 10 days prior to Anthropic pulling those models, President Trump signed an executive order establishing a framework for the federal government.
Right, the vetting framework.
Exactly. A framework to vet the national security risks of the most advanced AI systems for up to a month before they can be released to the public. Now, while participation by AI developers is voluntary under the framework, the specific directive issued to Anthropic triggered the immediate suspension of their commercial rollout.
And Anthropic has responded publicly, stating that this is a misunderstanding, and they hope to restore access to the Fable 5 and Mythos 5 models as soon as possible. As of now, the Commerce Department hasn't issued a comment.
Mechanically, enforcing an export ban on an API is vastly different than stopping physical goods at a border.
Right. How do you even do that?
It requires developers to implement strict geofencing, advanced IP filtering, and deep know-your-customer protocols just to let someone type a prompt into a text box.
Wow.
So a major tech release was halted to align with these new federal export controls and security vetting protocols.
It's wild to me how a software launch is now treated with the same severity as international arms control. I mean, how should we process this new reality where the government can step in and halt a major tech rollout overnight?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it forces a total recalibration of Silicon Valley's business model. Artificial intelligence has officially transitioned from a commercial technology to sovereign infrastructure.
Sovereign infrastructure.
Yes. The capabilities of these models, writing complex code, discovering zero-day vulnerabilities like that HTTP2 bomb, or running 2047 autonomous agents, are now viewed as fundamental instruments of national power.
So it's no longer just about user agreements and app store policies. The era of frictionless, unregulated global software deployment is just over.
It really challenges the listener and the industry to think critically about the balance between rapid technological innovation and national security. For decades, software easily crossed borders. But when that software can fundamentally alter a nation's cybersecurity and defense posture, government intervention becomes the new baseline. Export controls are the new reality for developers.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the stories. But before we wrap up, let's transition to our week ahead segment, because based on all this news, here is exactly what you need to watch for in the immediate future. First, monitor Anthropic's status page and any Commerce Department communications next week. We need to see if access to Claude Fable 5 and Myth S5 is restored as the company attempts to resolve this misunderstanding.
That specific situation will be the definitive test case for how these new federal vetting frameworks operate in practice.
Definitely. Second, watch for the rollout of the Gemini Omni Flash APIs to developers and enterprise customers, which Google slated for the coming weeks. You might actually start seeing those autonomous agent tools and third-party apps very soon.
Your AI sous chef might be closer than you think.
Right. And finally, pour one out for IT administrators worldwide. Next week, they're going to be scrambling to deploy Oracle's out-of-band security patch for CDE 2026-35273 to stop further ShinyHunters breaches.
Oh, yeah.
All while tackling Microsoft's record 206 updates across their networks. It is going to be a very busy week in the server room.
It certainly will be. And as we conclude today, I want to leave you with one final lingering question to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We talked about how AI teams like OpenAI's Codex can find a flaw capable of wiping out 64 gigabytes of memory in 45 seconds. And we saw how Microsoft needs 206 patches in a single month to keep up.
Right.
So, what happens to our global infrastructure the moment threat actors like ShinyHunters get their hands on those exact same AI vulnerability hunting capabilities?